Hey everybody, I have a video here for you today. Now, I've been asked lately a few times about Gobekli Tepe, basically what is it all about, and why do I think it was intentionally buried? And those are excellent questions. Gobekli Tepe is definitely a game changer. It is proof of sophisticated civilizations living thousands of years before the standard model of history says that they started. And, you know, it's hard enough to wrap your head around stuff that went on, say, in Egypt, say 4,000 years ago. And just to think that those Egyptians of 4,000 years ago look back to the time period of Göbekli Tepe as twice as far as we look back to the Egyptians of 4,000 years ago. So it is definitely a head scratcher, and it is definitely rewrote history. And this site here, it's basically an artificial hill that was used by burying these circular stone structures. There may be hundreds of these on the hillside. Maybe 5 or 10% of Göbekli Tepe has been uncovered to date. And there is obvious sophistication in these pillars. Animals and birds have been carved in three-dimensional form into these pillars. And that just adds to the mystery of Göbekli Tepe. But the time period, it was a cataclysmic time on Earth, and to provide an answer to why it was buried, you know, I think you might have to look, or the most common sense answer is to look to those cataclysms. And maybe this was where civilization, a civilization that was wiped out in a cataclysm, came. They were thrown back into the Stone Age, and this is where they came as a central location to restart education and spirituality and basically get their orientation again after a cataclysm maybe threw the earth off its axis a little bit. That is just a possibility. But we know it is dated to 12,000 years old. Sedimentation leaves a certain signature. When fill is used to carry or to bury a place, that leaves a specific signature. And this was left in pristine form or fashion just because it was buried and no further datable carbon material got in and contaminated the site. So we know it's 12,000 years old and was buried 1,500 years later. And I think a possibility of Göbekli Tepe and why it was buried can be kind of reflected in a legend coming from the Hopi Indian. And I will leave this link below. This is Ancient Origins, and it talks about the Ant people who led the Hopi into subterranean caves and taught them civilization and cared for them through this cataclysmic time on Earth. And the Ant people in this interview and a few others this article are associated with Orion. And here you see this in the classic form of Orion. I've talked about it. And the skirt and the feet and the right arm in the air. I think the Ant people and Orion is a legitimate fit together. And I will leave the link for this below. This is very interesting, coming from Gary David. That's Ancient Origins. And on this website, I will leave the link to this below, but it says, and this is Gary David talking, it says that Hopi's sense of history goes like this. The first world was destroyed by fire, which may have manifested itself in an asteroid strike or some kind of volcanism, or maybe the asteroid or comet strike led to the volcanism. It says the second world was destroyed by ice, indicating that an ice age or an extremely cold period. The Ant people led the Hopis down into caverns where they survived the terrible cataclysms being suffered by the earth. The Ant people also taught the Hopis to sprout beans in the caverns in order to feed the people, an event commemorated even today by the ritual bean dance. And one thing that we just have to look to Göbekli Tepe, you know, why was this place intentionally buried? Well, the Hopis, in one of their legends, it seems that they knew of a cataclysm coming, and maybe the people of Göbekli Tepe knew a cataclysm was coming, and maybe they went to another place in Turkey called Derinkuyu and built these tremendous underground cities that are really baffling, and we have no idea when to originally date these. Other civilizations came along and used these for different purposes, but maybe the original purpose of these was as shelter from the environmental effects of a global cataclysm that we can know for sure today by good geological evidence that they did indeed happen. And you can look at ice core graphs from Greenland, and they show these cataclysms happening at 10,800 BC and 9,500 BC. And it just is around the time of Göbekli Tepe. So maybe the civilizations went to Cappadocia just because underground cities could be built in the region, the way the earth is in that area. And maybe these massive underground cities were built by the same people who buried Göbekli Tepe. I think that is a possibility that you have to kind of look into. They buried Göbekli Tepe for some reason. High sophistication was put in to this site. There's astronomical alignments that some people have gone into, and I will try to leave some links below. And these animals and birds that were carved in three-dimensional form, there seemed to be a story here being told. And I'm going to mention this just because I think it's very interesting. I have talked about the Sphinx, what we know today as the Sphinx, just because the Greeks wanted to tie it to their mythology and call it the Sphinx about 2,000 years ago. That's why we call it the Sphinx today. But the original form, I have put out videos saying that it could have been what we know today as Anubis, or a dog or a jackal type god of some kind that came down to us as Anubis. And that the Sphinx is on an east-west line, looking directly at the rising sun on the spring equinox. Well, Göbekli Tepe, which may have been built in the same time period as the Sphinx, because geological evidence says the Sphinx is many thousands of years older than the standard model history teaches us. This pillar is on a direct east-west alignment, and it has a dog form on it. And this pillar is on a direct east-west alignment, just as the Sphinx is. This comes from the same time period as maybe the Sphinx was built. That is something that I just wanted to bring up and I thought was very interesting. But that might be the answer, I believe. Göbekli Tepe, why it was buried. They saw a cataclysm coming just because they were a sophisticated society. They looked to the stars just because of the constellations that seem to be depicted, and the sun on some of these pillars, and alignments to the rising stars in certain areas. But once again, I will try to leave the link below. I think it could have been intentionally buried because they knew shit was going to hit the fan and they needed to go underground. Just it seems like societies or civilizations around the globe seem to go underground to survive what were called never-ending hellish winters on Earth. Maybe they went to Derinkuyu and built this. Hope you thought this was interesting. You have a nice day.